guys, welcome back to my kitchen. So I have a party at my house tomorrow and I have some super yummy sourdough baguettes that I just baked this morning. So I thought it would be fun to do a bread and butter board. So we're going to do a dessert bread and butter board for this party. And I am going to do 3 different flavors of butter. The first one is a spicy honey butter. The second one will be a cinnamon roll brown butter. And then the third one is a dark chocolate sea salt butter. So I'm pretty excited about those flavors. And I think that the party guests are really going to love them. I love the idea of charcuterie boards. And my sister is like the queen of charcuterie boards. She does them for parties and they're unbelievably beautiful, and party guests always really love them. The problem that I have with them is how pricey they are, and quite frankly, it's not stuff that I always have in my house. So I love the idea of a bread and butter board for a party because it tends to be things that I keep. And then in all, it's going to end up being a less expensive party platter to put together. So I am going to get started on making the different flavors of butter, and I will show you guys exactly how I'm going to do that. Before I get started making any of the butters, I'm going to make a topping for one of them. So I am going to make some candied pecans. So the first thing I'm going to do is chop up about a cup of pecans, and then I'm going to add that to a 1/4 cup of brown sugar and 2 tablespoons of heavy cream. I'm going to mix that together really well, put it in a 350-degree oven, and cook that for about 20 minutes. So the first butter that I am going to work on is going to be a spicy honey butter. And I am pretty excited about the flavors on this one. I love a good honey butter, but adding some spice to it, oof, even better. So I'm going to start with just my room temperature butter, and I'm just going to kind of mash it down just a little bit. So I have a 1/2 cup of honey here. If you have honey that has kind of gone granular, which is what has happened to mine, you can just stick it in the microwave and heat it up, and those granules will just kind of melt back. So for this, you're just going to mix together your honey and your butter. And I think I'm going to switch over to a whisk here. And this makes a really good butter alone, just the honey. But if you really want to take it to that next level, you can add some cayenne. So I'm going to add maybe like 1/8 teaspoon of cayenne. You do not want that to be overwhelming. For a cup of butter, about 1/8 teaspoon is perfect. So I am just going to mix this all together until I get a nice, completely combined mixture. So that's it for this one. I am going to stick this one in the refrigerator and let it kind of solidify a little bit more. That honey that I put in there was warm because I had to put it in the microwave. So I just need to get this a little bit more solidified, but as of right now, it is the flavor that it's going to be, and I have to say the flavor of this one is pretty dynamite. Okay, so the second butter that we are going to work on is probably my favorite, and it is a cinnamon roll brown butter. So if you've never browned butter before, I love using this as an ingredient. It kind of counts for me as like a second ingredient. So butter is really good on its own, but when you brown it, you get a completely different flavor. And so I love having the ability to do that because I can use butter in one way and then I can use brown butter in a very different way. So I am going to show you, if you've never browned butter before, I'm going to show you how to do it. It's very simple. It just takes a couple of minutes. So we're going to start out just putting a cup of butter in our pan, and then just turn on your heat. You're going to want your heat to be about maybe about a medium, and then I'm going to start just stirring this around and getting it good and melted. So you're going to see that your butter is going to start to foam a little bit. Salted butter actually does this a lot worse than unsalted butter. That's totally normal. That's okay. So once everything is all melted, you're going to just kind of keep it moving a little bit. You don't have to constantly stir it, but as that butter starts to cook, some of the liquid that is in that butter is going to start evaporating, so you're going to see some steam. Again, it's going to foam up. And the longer you go, the darker the milk solids are going to get. So you kind of want to just move that foam aside so you can start to see the milk solids change color. You can stop it before this. A lot of people do. But I would strongly suggest be really brave with your brown butter and let it get a little bit darker. You don't want it to burn, obviously, but the darker the color, the deeper the flavor. So this is the point that I am going to stop, and then I will show you guys what to do next. So while I had my butter browning, I got a big bowl and I put some ice in it, and then I have a smaller bowl inside of it. The reason that I am doing that is I want to bring the temperature of that brown butter down pretty quickly, just to give us something that is spreadable and not pourable. So in order to make the cinnamon roll part, I'm going to add a half a cup of brown sugar to my bowl and about 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. And then on top of that, I am going to directly pour my brown butter. I'm gonna get all those little browned bits in there. So adding my brown sugar directly to my bowl before I added the butter in is just going to melt that brown sugar into that butter, and it's going to ensure that you're going to get the flavor, but you're not going to get the graininess. So since we're using this as a spread, I want to be really cautious to make sure that it's not grainy in there. So I am just going to stir and stir and whisk and whisk and whisk. And eventually this ice is going to cool this down, and we are going to get a spreadable buttered consistency. I had something else that I had to run and do, and I had to end up leaving that butter in the ice a little bit too long, so it got super solidified. And then I tasted it, and it wasn't quite sweet enough, so I did go ahead and add a half a cup of powdered sugar. So I didn't add more brown sugar because I didn't want it to be grainy, and we were past the point of that brown sugar being able to dissolve. You can see as you start to whip it that it gets lighter in color. That's super normal. If you are making just a whipped brown butter, when you whip it, it's gonna change color as well. All right, that looks great. So that is our second butter, and it's really good. The last butter that we're gonna work on today is a dark chocolate sea salt butter. So we have a pan of water, and I am going to, it's not boiling, but it's pretty warm. So I am going to take a dry bowl. So the enemy of chocolate is water. I know we're putting it on top of water, but the water isn't actually going to touch it. So I have a clean dry bowl here, and I am going to add a cup of dark chocolate chips to that. If you have a good quality one, now is definitely a time to use that. I'm gonna let this kind of sit for a second, and the heat from that water is going to start to melt that chocolate. And that's what we want it to do. So I am going to let this go and keep stirring it just to make sure that everything is melting fairly evenly. Okay, so we got our chocolate melted. It is shiny and smooth and delicious looking. It smells great, but the bowl and the chocolate itself are pretty warm right now. So if I were to put the butter directly in just like this, it would absolutely melt that butter, and it would just kind of be a big mess. So I don't want to do that. So I'm going to let this cool maybe for about 5-10 minutes, just to bring that, at least the bowl, down closer to room temperature, and then we will mix our butter into that. Butter is in, and I am going to pretty much immediately start using my hand mixer this time. I want to get this butter and some air incorporated as quickly as possible, just to make sure that that butter doesn't really melt in that chocolate. I have like a good news, bad news scenario here, so I just did exactly what I said you shouldn't do, and that is that I put that butter in before the chocolate was cool enough. So it did melt the butter a little bit, but you can see that this is like pretty runny. That's the bad news. The good news is it's not ruined. So all I'm going to do at this point is just take it and put it in the refrigerator while I get everything else kind of put together. So by the time I get everything else on my board ready to go, this one should be a good spreadable consistency. I have my butters all finished and my bread is sliced, and so I am going to start putting everything together now. I'm going to put the spicy honey butter in the middle just because of the color that it is, and this looks so good. So I am just going to put it directly down onto my board, and then I'm going to just take a spoon and just kind of smooth it out, make it pretty. Now the butter that I used is a grass-fed butter, which is why it's so yellow. If you do not start out with a really yellow butter, then this honey butter is not going to be this bright. Then the next one that I'm going to do is my cinnamon roll brown butter. If you wanted to get super fancy, then you could use a piping tip and pipe this on. And then my dark chocolate one should be done, so I'm gonna pull that out of the refrigerator now. This looks so yummy. So I did set up, you can see it has like a spreadable consistency, so I'm going to add this to this side of my board. I said that the cinnamon roll brown butter one was my favorite, but I have to say I just can't get over the delicious dark chocolate smell that this one has. And now that I have my butters all spread out, I'm gonna add a little bit of topping to them. So I want anybody who grabs the spicy one, the spicy honey, to know that there's some spice in it. So I am just going to sprinkle on just some red pepper flakes. It's gonna add a little bit of color to it too, which is nice, but mostly I'm just doing that so that anybody who grabs that knows, hey, this one has some spice to it. For the dark chocolate, I have just some mini chocolate chips, but what I think this dark chocolate one really needs is some flaky sea salt, so I'm gonna add that on there too. And I think that this one's probably gonna be a crowd favorite. And then for our cinnamon roll, I'm gonna add on those candied pecans that I made. And the last thing that I'm gonna add is just some pre-sliced bread. And then do another layer on this side. And that is it for my bread and butter board for my party at my house tomorrow. I'm gonna take this and stick it in the refrigerator. And I definitely have some extra bread to go ahead and have sliced up because this is a lot of butter for this amount of bread. I love this idea. I think it is so fun, but more importantly, I think it is really, really delicious. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.